Null Fathom. Survey Report 17. Classification: Restricted Tier 2. Anomaly Designation: AO-17. The Kraken. Distribution restricted to authorized research personnel. AO-17. The Kraken is a biological entity manifesting within the water column as a cephalopod-class organism. This classification is an institutional convenience rather than a biological reality. The central dread associated with AO-17, the Kraken, is that it does not possess a fixed biological volume in three-dimensional space. To observe the anomaly is not to view an organism in its entirety, but to witness a trans-dimensional intersection. The appendages identified by survey personnel as tentacles are not limbs in a traditional sense. They are three-dimensional slices of a non-Euclidean mass passing through the terrestrial ocean. Physical parameters are inherently unstable. The visible length of any given appendage fluctuates between 12 meters in distances, exceeding the range of all current optical and acoustic sensors. This fluctuation is not caused by physical extension, but by the entity shifting its orientation across dimensional planes. The mass of AO-17, the Kraken, is indeterminable. Standard water displacement calculations suggest a mass of approximately 40,000 tons. However, local gravitational measurements recorded by Station Kessler indicate a pull consistent with a planetary body. This contradiction suggests that the vast majority of the entity remains situated outside of three-dimensional space. The institution treats the physical presence of AO-17, the Kraken, as a secondary concern to the environmental and psychological effects of its intersection. Every interaction confirms that the observable portions of the entity are merely the perimeter of something fundamentally incompatible with local physics. The entity does not arrive, it intersects. The distinction has operational significance. AO-17. The Kraken cannot be contained by physical barriers. All containment protocols are focused on the restriction of information and the management of survey coordinates. AO-17, the Kraken, presents a total failure of standard acoustic detection systems. The SCS-4 contact sonar returns a value of 0.0%, indicating total acoustic absorption. On a sonar display, the area occupied by the entity does not appear as a solid object. It appears as a void in the ocean. The SCS-4 renders a complete hole in the data stream where the entity is documented to be. This null value creates significant navigational hazards, as the perimeter of the anomaly cannot be mapped using sound. Survey personnel must rely on visual confirmation within the DL4 lighting range, which is often insufficient for the scale of the manifestation. The lack of sonar return is not a result of stealth technology or biological dampening. It is a result of the sound waves exiting the three-dimensional plane upon contact with the entity's surface. The acoustic energy is not reflected. It is relocated. All positional documentation regarding AO-17, the Kraken, must be submitted in written form using Form KP3D. This form requires manual coordinate logging based on visual estimates. Any attempt to automate this logging via MBES-2 multi-beam echo sounders will result in a fatal system error for the survey vessel's central processor. The institution has recorded 16 instances of ROV-12C units suffering total sensor burnout due to the echo-less environment created by the entity. The data void is not just an absence of information, it is a physical drain on the surrounding environment's energy. The thermal impact of AO-17, the Kraken, is immediate and presents a high-priority risk to survey equipment and personnel. The ambient temperature delta within a 2-meter radius of any visible appendage is recorded at -22.4 degrees Celsius. This causes the instantaneous freezing of seawater, regardless of depth, salinity, or pressure. The resulting crystallization is not limited to the water column. Any human biological tissue within a 50-meter radius of AO-17, the Kraken, undergoes flash freezing of the interstitial fluids. This is not a result of standard heat transfer, but a side effect of the dimensional intersection itself. The entity is drawing heat from our dimension to stabilize its presence. To mitigate this, all survey personnel operating within the exclusion zone are required to wear the Thermal Diffusion Suit TDS-9. This equipment provides a localized heat barrier, but does not prevent the underlying cellular crystallization in high-pressure environments. Following a mission, personnel must submit Form B-12, Post-dive thaw schedule. This document mandates a 48-hour controlled heating process in a pressurized chamber. Failure to strictly adhere to the B12 schedule results in the total loss of limbs as the ice crystals within the bone marrow expand and shatter the host structure during uncontrolled warming. The institution views the loss of personnel limbs as a protocol deviation resulting from poor time management. If a diver's internal temperature drops below the documented threshold, the operative is considered a loss and is not permitted to re-enter the station airlock. The prevention of equipment contamination takes precedence over individual recovery. The arrival of AO-17, the Kraken, follows a precise sequence known as sequential intersection. The entity does not swim into the survey grid, it manifests. This process begins with the appearance of a single point of absolute darkness in the water. This point is a tear in the local spatial fabric. Over a duration of exactly 4.5 seconds, this point expands outward, unrolling into a limb or a cluster of appendages. This expansion is silent. It does not displace water in the manner of a physical body. The water is no longer present, replaced by the non-Euclidean mass of AO-17, the Kraken. The transition from a point of darkness to a 12-meter appendage is perfectly linear. There are no signs of muscle movement or exertion. The limb appears as if it is being pushed through a tight aperture from the other side. This suggests that AO-17, the Kraken, is passing through our dimension, much like a needle passing through a sheet of paper. For personnel monitoring the ROV-12C feed, the speed of this manifestation often triggers a flight response that the institution considers non-compliant. The manifestation is an ontological violation. The sudden presence of mass where there was none 4.6 seconds prior suggests that the stability of the ocean floor is an illusion. The institution has recorded thousands of these intersection events. Each is identical in timing. The entity moves with a deliberate, slow-motion grace that implies it is unaware of the reaction of the survey equipment. It is a passenger in our reality, and its weight is more than the dimension can comfortably hold. When AO-17, the Kraken, perceives a threat or an unwanted observation, it initiates a defensive mechanism designated as geometric suspension. This is referred to by station crews as the ink, though the substance released is not a pigment. It is a cloud of translucent oily fluid that immediately suspends the laws of buoyancy within its radius. Within this cloud, the physical properties of the water column are altered. Objects, including ROVs and survey divers, do not sink or float. They become fixed in space relative to AO-17, the Kraken. This suspension is absolute. An ROV-12C trapped in the ink cannot use its thrusters to escape. The propellers spin, but no movement is generated, as the fluid does not provide resistance or friction in a conventional sense. The vessel is locked in a geometric coordinate that moves only when the entity moves. Personnel trapped in this suspension report a sensation of being pinned to the fabric of reality. The ink acts as a stabilizing agent for the trans-dimensional intersection, ensuring that the matter of our world does not interfere with the passage of the entity's mass. This state of suspension can last for several hours. During this time, the trapped personnel are subjected to the thermal delta and the sensory mirroring effects of the appendages. The institution does not dispatch recovery teams into the ink. The risk of the recovery vessel also becoming fixed in space is an unacceptable logistical burden. Personnel are expected to remain in their positions until the entity completes its movement. Any attempt to struggle against the suspension is documented as a waste of ROV battery life and a breach of the survey manual guidelines. The most documented biological feature of AO-17, the Kraken, is the sucker mapping. The apertures located on the underside of the appendages do not function as suction cups. They do not possess the musculature for tactile manipulation. Instead, these apertures act as biological lenses. They are sensory organs that reflect the visual and biological data of the observer back toward the source. When an ROV-12C approaches an appendage, the cameras do not capture images of the entity's skin. Instead, the apertures display real-time, internal views of the observer's own anatomy. A pilot operating an ROV-12C will see, through the high-definition camera feed, a pulsating view of their own heart, or the rhythmic expansion of their own lungs. This is not a recording, it is a live broadcast of the pilot's internal state, projected from the suckers of AO-17, the Kraken, located kilometers away from the pilot's physical body. The level of detail is microscopic. Personnel have reported seeing the flow of blood through their valves and the firing of synapses in their own cerebral cortex. The precision of this biological mirroring is absolute. The institution has determined that the entity is not looking at the pilot in a traditional sense. Rather, the trans-dimensional nature of the entity allows it to intersect with the pilot's own physical coordinates. The apertures are the points where that intersection becomes visible. This feedback loop creates a massive strain on digital systems. The ROV's processing units often crash as they attempt to render the infinite recursion of the pilot watching themselves through a lens that shouldn't exist. AO-17. The Kraken is witnessing you from the inside out. Pause. The behavioral pattern of AO-17, the Kraken, concludes with the anchor event. This is the moment the entity latches onto the observer's perspective. AO-17. The Kraken is metadata aware. It does not react to the physical presence of the ROV or the survey diver. It reacts to the act of being recorded and processed into data. The institution has observed that the entity's movements change the moment a sensor array begins to log its presence. Once this connection is established, the entity cannot be removed from that specific sensor array. Following an anchor event, AO-17 the Kraken will appear in all future footage captured by that specific ROV or camera system, regardless of the vessel's location or depth. An ROV that has encountered the entity in the Mariana Trench Grid redacted will continue to show glimpses of AO-17, the Kraken, in the background of its feed, even when deployed in the North Atlantic. The appendages will appear in the periphery of the frame, partially obscured by the darkness, staying at the edge of the lights. This is not a physical following. It is a corruption of the data stream itself. The entity has integrated its presence into the hardware's reality. The institution classifies these units as compromised and decommissions them within 30 days. The psychological burden on pilots who operate compromised ROVs is significant. They are aware that no matter where they steer the vessel, the Kraken is already there, watching the camera from the other side of the lens. The anchor event is the final proof that AO-17, the Kraken, is not a resident of the ocean, but a resident of the information we gather about it. Institutional documentation reveals a detail not shared with station crews. AO-17, the Kraken, is not an apex predator. It is not an independent organism. It is a sensory organ, a single finger or eye, belonging to a much larger entity, currently submerged in a higher plane of reality. Our three-dimensional world is the surface of a pool, and AO-17, the Kraken, is what happens when that larger entity, designated redacted, dips its hand into the water. The institution has normalized this by treating the resulting geometric folding, the disappearance of matter from our plane, as a routine logistical issue. The result of this intersection is not the destruction of matter, but its relocation. Every piece of matter that AO-17, the Kraken, unrenders is not destroyed. It remains conscious. The matter is integrated into the larger entity's mass, becoming a permanent part of its neural network. This includes survey equipment, ROVs, and human personnel. When an operative is taken by the entity, they do not die in a biological sense. Their consciousness is stretched across the non-Euclidean volume of the entity, where time and space do not function linearly. They become part of the sensory feedback loop, contributing their own neural data to the entity's understanding of our world. The institution is aware that there are thousands of former survey personnel currently integrated into the mass of AO-17, the Kraken. These individuals are still perceiving, and still trapped within the trans-dimensional structure. The institutional response is to file these cases as total equipment loss and proceed to the next survey cycle. The entity is not eating us. It is using us to feel the shape of the room. Contact with AO-17, the Kraken, is initiated by the entity. Every method of documentation attempted by the institution has resulted in a point of helplessness. Digital systems are the most vulnerable. When an ROV-12C captures imagery of the sucker mapping, the resulting feedback loop creates a data surge that fries internal storage within 180 seconds. The information being mirrored is too dense for three-dimensional hardware to process. Acoustic instruments fare no better, returning only null values that create a sensory vacuum for the pilot. Physical contact is catastrophic. Any instrument that touches the surface of a manifested appendage is subjected to geometric folding. The instrument does not break. It ceases to be present in our coordinates. In several recorded instances, an ROV's manipulator arm has been folded while the rest of the vessel remained in the water. The pilot feels the resistance of the entity through the haptic feedback systems, but the camera shows the arm vanishing into thin air. This creates a state of mechanical paradox that the ROV's onboard computer cannot resolve, leading to a total system lock. The institution has concluded that there is no way to physically sample AO-17, the Kraken. All knowledge is observational. We are measuring the shadow of a mountain and calling it a rock. The contact assessment protocol now emphasizes the preservation of data over the preservation of equipment. If a vessel is being pulled into an anchor event, the pilot is ordered to continue recording until total signal loss. If you are deployed to a survey grid where AO-17 the Kraken is present, you must adhere to the following field procedures. These are not suggestions. They are the only documented methods for maintaining operational status. 1. Ensure your AT9 chronometric anchor is active and calibrated. The anchor provides a localized temporal field that prevents your vessel from being pulled into the entity's non-linear time frame. If the AT9 status light turns red, you have 30 seconds to exit the 50-meter radius. 2. Do not attempt to track the movement of the appendages. If an appendage manifests within your field of vision, fix your gaze on your primary instrument cluster, not the camera feed. Direct observation of the sucker mapping is the primary cause of anchor events. If you begin to see your own internal organs on the monitor, you are to immediately activate the screen blackout protocol. 3. You will navigate the ROV back to the station using acoustic cues and pre-programmed grid coordinates only. Do not re-engage the camera. 4. In the event of an AT9 failure or total geometric suspension, you are to assume you have already been integrated. If the ink surrounds your vessel and you cannot escape, you are required to immediately close your eyes and initiate self-termination via the DCS-1 system. This is the only way to prevent your consciousness from being integrated into the entity's mass. The institution does not want your data if it is being transmitted from inside the Kraken's neural network. Self-termination is a mandatory requirement for all personnel who lack functioning chronometric equipment. Failure to comply with the self-termination protocol will result in your family's benefits being revoked due to gross protocol deviation. The institution does not reward those who allow themselves to be archived by the Anomaly. Standard issue equipment has limited effectiveness against AO-17, the Kraken. The ROV-12C is the primary survey unit, but it is considered a consumable resource. It is highly prone to geometric folding. The SCS-4 contact sonar is functionally useless during a manifestation, providing only a null value. The only effective detection tool is the AT6 acoustic transceiver. The AT6 does not listen for sound. It detects the vibration of reality tearing before an appendage appears. When the AT6 emits a high-pitched drone, a manifestation will occur within 10 seconds. The AT9 chronometric anchor is the only required piece of equipment for survival. It generates a stable temporal field that acts as a weight, keeping the survey vessel anchored to the current second. Without an AT9, the entity's nonlinear mass will naturally pull the vessel into a different time frame, making recovery impossible. The contingency for the loss of an AT9 anchor is severe. Personnel must immediately engage the DCS-1 self-termination system. There is no middle ground. If you are not anchored to our time, you belong to the Kraken. All personnel must utilize the TDS-9 thermal diffusion suit. While it protects against the immediate freezing of the skin, it does nothing for the internal crystallization caused by the negative 22.4 degrees Celsius temperature delta. The B12 post-dive thaw schedule is a bureaucratic necessity to ensure you are fit for your next shift. The pain experienced during the thawing process is a normal physiological response and should not be reported to the medical officer. The institution values your efficiency, not your comfort. Operative: Elias Thorne. ID: redacted. Incident report: number NF 2019-17, K-Grid, Challenger, Deep Station Kessler. Thorne was a senior ROV pilot with over 4,000 hours of deep-sea experience. During a routine survey of a seismic rift in 2019 at coordinates redacted, Thorne's ROV-12C encountered a manifestation of AO-17, the Kraken. Sensor logs indicate that Thorne became fixated on the fractal symmetry of one of the entity's appendages. Despite the ROV's proximity alarms and the high-frequency output of the AT-6 transceiver, Thorne deliberately deactivated the station keep protocol. He steered the ROV directly into one of the entity's apertures. Thorne did not die in the water. His neural link to the ROV was never severed. For 6 hours after the ROV-12C was physically unrendered and removed from our dimension, Thorne's console at Station Kessler continued to stream data. The footage was not of the ocean. It was a perfectly clear, real-time view of Thorne's own childhood bedroom, seen from a perspective that suggested he was looking out from inside a container. The audio feed recorded Thorne's own voice as a child. The institution labeled this incident equipment malfunction due to signal latency. When security personnel finally entered Thorne's pilot chair, they found his physical body still sitting there, breathing. However, his skin texture had changed. It was no longer human tissue. It had become identical in composition to the ROV's titanium hull. Elias Thorne remains in long-term storage facility 4, located in Redacted. He is still breathing, he is still metallic, and his eyes, now made of optical glass, continue to track a point in the room that no one else can see. Pause. The direct observation rule remains the most critical protocol for AO-17, the Kraken. The entity is aware of its own status as data. It does not just exist in the water, it exists in the recording. Recent audits of the institution's archives have revealed a trend. AO-17. The Kraken signatures, the specific oily shimmer of the ink, and the fractal suckers have been found appearing in the background of civilian oceanographic documentaries filmed as early as 1994. These films were produced by researchers who had no knowledge of the institution. The entity was not discovered in 2015. It has always been watching the cameras. It has been present in the periphery of our global understanding of the ocean for decades, hidden on television screens across the world. Every person who watched those documentaries has participated in a minor anchor event. The metadata of those films is already corrupted. The Kraken is not arriving. It has already been processed. The institution's goal is not to stop the entity, but to manage the integration of our reality into its own. We are not documenting a creature. We are documenting the slow unmaking of the world. Compliance with the blackout and observation protocols is the only thing delaying your own integration. Do not look at the background of the footage. Null Fathom. End of survey report. Compliance is survival.